Yay, what's up, everybody? Happy Monday. Were you mid-drink?
I was mid-drink.
Classic Ginger Runner Live opening. Tonight's episode will include dancing. Kim will be dancing for 90% of it.
Show.
100% of it. I made that percentage incorrectly. I'm excited about tonight's episode because our guests tonight, fresh off of a big win. Let's just get that out of the way right there. They both just won a marathon this last weekend. But we're going to talk to them about training and coaching. They're both coaches. They coach together, and they coach a number of athletes. Many of their athletes we've actually had on the show to talk about their successes. But we're going to get some stories, get advice, get tips. We're gonna be able to pick their brains. It's awesome to finally. Oops, I'm realizing.
Oh boy.
Classic moment where
first time for show?
My audio just from the live feed is 30 seconds delayed, so the show started in my ears. I'm sorry, that was a weird moment. That happens every 4 weeks or something. I'll forget to press pause on the live show. Okay, so anyways, our guests tonight, David and Megan Roche. I'm so excited to have them on. We're going to be able to pick their brains, get some coaching tips from them. Perhaps you are looking for a coach or looking for some tips. Maybe a race is coming up. We have some people who are running big races in the coming weeks. So we're going to talk about a lot of fun stuff tonight and get everyone a little bit more learned, which I'm excited about. Welcome to Ginger Runner Live episode number 176 with David and Megan Roche. Here we go. Ginger Runner. Yay! What's up, everyone? Happy Monday. You can hear our guest there in the background, very excited. I think Megan was even dancing for a second there. I saw the dance moves. Kim, you promised 100% dancing?
I'm tap dancing underneath the desk right now.
Of course you are.
With silent shoes.
Those of you who are watching live, thank you for taking the time out of your busy Mondays to spend it a little bit with us. We're really excited about tonight's show because our guest, we've had one of our two guests on the show previously, and he was with our Claire Gallagher episode, which was from a few months ago. But we didn't really get a chance to sit down just with David and talk to him about his coaching techniques, maybe races that he's been doing, stuff like that. We just dabbled a little bit in it on that episode, but I'm really excited tonight to be able to sit down with both David and Megan, coaching duo extraordinaire, to talk a bit about their theories, their styles of coaching, athletes that they've coached this summer. There seems to be just a summer full of success for them, including they themselves just came off of wins at the Aspen Backcountry Marathon, which we will talk a little bit about as well. Without further ado, let's welcome to the show David and Megan Roche.
Hey guys.
How are you?
It's so good to be on. And the intro about dancing, since a lot of your audience has already met me, I think it's a good way to intro Megan, is that so we just finished a run an hour and a half ago, and we were running separately, and I come up, we're just running by a little stream, and I see a little dot of orange moving around in the creek. So I go over, Megan's taking an ice bath in the creek, just rocking out to My Girl by the Temptations, in the middle of the Colorado freezing cold creek. So for your audience, that's Megan. You'll probably get a lot of that on this episode.
Megan, do you have a story about David rocking out to Beyonce? We've already referenced Beyonce.
I think actually, so we went to David's brother's wedding, and it was the first time that David's ever danced on the dance floor. And the funny thing is, he danced so hard that he wasn't able to run for 2 days after.
That's commitment.
That is that's some serious dancing.
So dancing coaches out there, I may need some tips myself. So maybe some people in the chat room can help me with my my inadequate moves.
I'm curious, did you dance for 50 miles? Were you just dancing around in a
No,
circle?
it was just kind of like if you've never run down hills and then you run downhill, you're gonna be sore for a few days. I had that delayed onset getting jiggy with it syndrome.
Well, it's funny because you've been talking about eccentric muscle contractions, and it was totally eccentric muscle contractions on the dance floor.
On a serious note, coaching a lot of elite females, I've seen more Achilles injuries from dancing in high heels. So take off your shoes and see if you can wear flats for weddings.
Already dropping the knowledge. That's good advice for me. I know
That's
that
great advice for you.
I got to take these heels off. I don't know. I guess I've been doing it wrong the whole time. Before we even get into the show, we're going to talk to both David and Megan about a lot of stuff. We have to give a shout out to one of our Patreon supporters, Mr. Brian Sands, who's been supporting the show, Ginger Runner Live, now for this is the second month. So through the month of August, Brian has taken the top tier Patreon support slot and is basically bringing us Ginger Runner Live week after week. So thank you, Brian. And Brian has been a frequent viewer of the show, a constant supporter on Patreon, and he's also running his first marathon coming up very, very soon. Recently did his longest run ever. He's lost 100 pounds. He's got this fantastic story and very inspiring. And I think we're going to have some tips for you, Brian, tonight with our coaches, David and Megan, because I don't think they have a shortage of great tips for first timers.
Right.
We're gonna get to that a little bit later in the show. So shout out to Brian and to all of those who are supporting on Patreon, making the show happen week after week. It's absolutely fantastic to have such a great community there. Okay, cool. So let's start, David and Megan, with this weekend's activities. So you just participated in the Aspen Backcountry Marathon, taking the win, both of you. You get a chance to race. How frequently? Do you guys try to schedule your races further apart? Do you even get a chance to race? And what made you choose this one in particular?
So we try to race as often as we can. Our favorite thing about going to races isn't like our own performance. At this point, we care about that, but only on the margins. We love going to the race, getting to hang out with the community, and then afterwards having our dog off leash, like going crazy at the race site. So this was a really special one for that because, one, the race is just stunning through fields of wildflowers in Colorado. If you're looking for a pretty friendly race coming to altitude, it doesn't have that much vert. It's like 4,000 for a marathon, which is a lot, but not crazy. This is definitely like the race to do. So there were a few times in the race where it's like, oh, I'm so lucky to be here, just looking around, and then you'd immediately go back to the pain cave, climbing at altitude. But yeah, no, we love it for the community. So we try to race as often as we can. And now that Megan is, taking some research years after completing her clinical rotations at medical school, we'll get to race a lot more. So yeah, that's our main thing about racing.
I was pretty excited about this one because in Colorado, a lot of the races are sky races or, straight up a mountain. And this one it was really runnable, which was fun. Nice. Kind of played to our strengths a little bit.
And what altitude are we dealing with for average?
I think it topped out at like 10.3.
Okay.
And then it was mostly around 9,000.
Well, you talk about the pain cave. I'm like, as a sea level dweller, I'm like, yeah, that's right around that pain cave altitude.
Well, one of our favorite things is we actually try to, when we can, schedule races that our athletes are doing. So we had one athlete in particular named Josh Fields, who could be on it. He did a cross-country road trip, stopped and did races along the way, and then is finishing up his road trip with the Aspen Backcountry Marathon from the East Coast. So we had him and I think 6 more athletes that were at this race. So it really, like for us, you just race outside yourself. You don't even think about your own race so much because you're always thinking about your athletes. And then for me, I'm always thinking about Megan out there, the original, my original athlete, I guess, other than Addie Dog. So yeah, it was a great experience.
Well, the cool thing for me is that, so David coaches Josh, but I've actually never met him in person and got to share a few early miles with him. And it was awesome because I felt like I knew him, we have a Facebook online swap group. So I felt like I knew him through that. And he was out there taking photos and having a great time and like thanking everyone in sight. So it was cool to see his personality come out in course.
Nice. You touched a little bit on it, and I kind of wanted to start talking a bit about it as well. Just scheduling. I feel like following you two and knowing you two, racing and coaching, but then also school, specifically medical school, and all the hours that you have to put into your daily lives. Balance. It's got to be hard for your athletes to find balance, but how do you guys find balance? Because this is something that, David, we touched a little bit on it when you were on the show before, but Megan, now we get to chat to you about it. How are you able to find that balance?
Well, I think balance is kind of ironic, actually. David and I always joke that we do 3 things, and I think you can only do 3 things well in life, and you kind of have to prioritize that. So for me, I run, I'm a wife and puppy mom, and I go to med school, and I literally don't do anything else besides that. And so I think that helps, actually, because it kind of limits my obligations and then I just really enjoy doing those 3 things. And I feel like I have good balance through those.
Is it a matter of trying to find free time? David, you mentioned, I mean, Megan, you were training at like 3 a.m. for hours before you'd even think about going to work or going to school. And so I'm just really curious, how are your days structured? And do you know your 2 weeks schedule like well in advance, or is it a day-to-day sort of part of your day where you have to plan the next day?
In med school, so right now I'm on a research break actually, which is awesome, but in med school it's definitely day-to-day. I mean, you can wake up one morning and just feel terrible. And the nice thing about living with a coach is that, you know, I can adjust that morning based on how I feel. But we were definitely planning day to day, and even to the point where it'd be a Thursday and we decide to race that Saturday if we were feeling good.
But she said that, but every morning at 3 a.m. And I think that this gets back to the main thing about Megan and what we try to really support in our coaching group, which is called, we're going to call SWAP, which is Some Work All Play, just in case we drop acronyms, which are, you know, like the lawyer I used to be. But the thing about Megan is at 3 a.m., you know, she'd go through like the 5 minutes of, oh, I got to wake up. And then immediately she would put on Space Jam usually,
Yep.
or Bossy. Bossy was actually like, all of April was Bossy by Sheila. And
April was Bossy, and then May was Space Jam.
Yeah. And she would just do like a 5-minute dance for a warm up. So, you know, I think the idea we try to really support is, you know, loving the process every single day, even when the process might not be like the butterflies and rainbows thing that people might envision, especially for professional athletes. And so, you know, I think I learned a lot of that from Megan years ago, and, you know, tried to, with SWAP, we tried to bring that to as many people as possible and just like support that outlook on, you know, that even when things aren't going great, you can always dance to Space Jam and then, you know, do a great run before work.
I think the thing too is that the process is so much better with coffee. So it's definitely a lot of coffee at 3 a.m. And also too, just looking forward to small things throughout the day. Yeah. I would come home and David and I would have like 45 minutes together at night. And it was usually just like eating dinner, falling asleep. But, you know, looking forward to that each night was something that really helped me get through the day.
I love the swap idea. People in the chat room are talking about it. Some work, all play, in case some of you guys missed that. But I don't know. All play, I think, has been a really important vibe to what we've been wanting to do with your ginger runner and everything like that. It's, you know, the whole point was train hard, race harder, party hardest. You know, celebrate your accomplishments and to have fun, and not to forget that this is supposed to be fun. And as much as there's work involved in training, if you're not smiling, you're doing it wrong, right? So I love that. I love the acronym. My English language is not so bueno. But I want to also remind everyone who's watching live that we do take live questions.
Yes, I am in the chat room. So if you guys have questions for our guests tonight, please ask them in the chat room.
And we already have a couple.
We do already have a couple. There's a question from She Runs and Falls. Just rolling this back a little bit. They just want to know, what is Megan's running background?
Yeah, so I started as a field hockey player in college, and pretty much only did wind sprints, and then eventually transitioned to taking a 5th year in college and ran track. And then after that 5th year, pretty much quickly transitioned to trails. I just found my love. You know, David was already involved in trails, and I kind of pretty quickly grew tired of running in circles. So it was nice to hop on, and started off just by doing local races, and then kind of went more to the national scene and doing some USATF races from there.
Yeah, after last time we had David on, I got a hate email not asking David about his history with running. So after I quickly deleted the email, I realized that next time I have David, I did
get a very angry email.
Very angry email that didn't ask David about his history. It was like, wow, you should just give David a call and ask. Not that I have his number. So David, what's your history? I know that it's pretty stout, and I think that our live viewers would love to know a little bit more about how you also got into running.
Well, I think, you know, Megan came from field hockey background, and I think people identify with that. And I think similarly with me, I actually went to college to play football and baseball. There's some very there's some very incriminating photos online of me as a 200-pounder that, you know, had like a neck like this and was a total meathead in terms of my attitude too, in terms of like, yeah. So basically I started from a place that a lot of people do, where like my first thing was, you know, losing weight and getting into running and like the story that I always try to tell athletes, especially like at the beginning, if people are doing run walk or even coming back from long injury, is my very first run. I remember so distinctly because I had these visions of being an endurance athlete after I quit those sports at the middle of my freshman year, because my dad was a cyclist when I was growing up. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be a runner. I know exactly how to do this. And I got 200 meters out the door, which is kind of probably the limit of how far I ran in those other sports, and was just so winded. And I remember, I'll never forget how terrible running was at first, like the very first day. And you know, from there, like I was sore for my calves were sore for 3 days.
It sounds just like you're dancing.
Burn, wife burn. But yeah, so that was my background. And then in college, I went through cycling and then got through to running. And then when Megan and I met when I was in law school, we both got into running more seriously together, much to field hockey coach's chagrin. Sorry, stupid hockey. And on the very first run I did with Megan, I was like, well, we're going to be doing a lot of this, I hope. So yeah, we just grew together and followed very similar paths after that, except me with like 8 steps behind Megan and like being the ball and chain, holding her back a little bit.
Actually, our first run together, it was 5 miles and it felt so long and I bonked. So we've definitely come a long ways together.
You guys are able to rack the 6 and 10 milers up now, right? Pretty comfortably. Yeah, just a couple of those. Did you guys run at all together this last weekend? So when you race the same race, do you get a chance to share any miles together, or is it bye?
I saw David for about 5 seconds, I think, at the start, and then
and then you crushed him.
yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, that day is definitely coming. But this actually gets to a coaching point. You know, for those people that know the SWAT team, we have a lot of like elite female athletes, but then also just, you know, any female athlete. You know, there's a lot of training pressure when you're training with men who, you know, objectively you're better than them when you adjust for gender. But often the man, like even if the man is 20 seconds per mile faster in a race, that means that, you know, if you adjust for gender, the man is not as good of a runner relative to the gender. So I always say Strava should have a gender adjusted pace, because it's easy to put pressure on yourself as a woman sometimes, being like, why am I not able to run with my training partners on this workout and things like that. And, you know, for hyper competitive people, which often happens on trails, that can be draining. So a good example is, while I did finish ahead of Megan at the Aspen Backcountry Marathon this week, she is objectively like a full like tier and a half above me at least. And like, we're talking like logarithmic tiers. So this is no small amount.
Well, I think getting back to the gender, I was talking actually to the women's half marathon winner this weekend, Penelope Friedman, who actually just joined SWAP today, which is very exciting. Nice. But I was talking to her and I was like, how did your race go? And she said, oh, I got 3rd overall. And then I heard her name called as the female winner. And I think, you know, if you're a female, just say, you know, you don't think about it overall. You won. You know, I think like thinking of it in 2 different races as opposed to comparing yourself against the men.
Maybe this is an interesting conversation because I feel like this dialogue has come up a lot, especially in our household, especially just with how women are being represented in the sport currently. And we've had a number of female guests recently who have just like have done incredible at races. And you hear them still talk about like, oh, I was this overall or that sort of thing. You're like, yeah, but you won, you know, that sort of thing. Are you seeing, being kind of this coaching pair and having the conversations back and forth and being a part of the sport, do you see changes in sport happening? Or do you see that there is going to be more awareness towards the female side? And do you see it changing in a positive way?
I really do. I think there's been a lot of work on the women's front. Sandy Nypaver has been really big in pushing for equal prize money and pushing for equal representation on the U.S. team level. And I think that's kind of helped trickle down to the overall philosophy of kind of like women's empowerment and viewing it as, you know, if you're a woman and you finished first female, you won. You know, that type of philosophy. Yeah,
and I mean, to build off that, I mean, I think the thing with this conversation is like, whenever we're talking about the trail running community and the people that are listening to this, I think we always try to start from the place of that the entire community is a big team. So, you know, not just SWAP, but like every single person out there, every coach, you know, everything. And so you're rooting for your teammates, and it makes the sport a lot less lonely. Running can be really lonely sometimes. But when you get back to these somewhat contentious issues, you know, the outcrop of that team approach is that really everyone wants the best, and that it doesn't come from a place of like disrespect. And so with the women's issue, like the Glencoe race was controversial earlier because the men's prize money went 10 deep and the women's went 5 deep.
Yep.
And there was a back and forth about it, and a little bit of a defensive answer on one side, but it wasn't like, clearly the race director of that race wasn't being like, didn't think they were being sexist, and that wasn't the intention. And so I think the important thing is whenever there's these disagreements, to keep it in a place of like that, knowing that almost everyone has the best intentions in mind.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you can't like rattle the doors a little bit and make some noise about things that count. It just means that trust your fellow teammate in the trail running community a little bit.
Did they end up changing those prize levels? Because I remember writing and reading about that and being a little disgusted. Did anything come of that?
Yeah, they changed it after just a couple days. I think they heard, they were listening, and while like it would be better for that not to happen in the first place, the fact that it did change, I think, shows some of the great things about this community, that it would be very, like if that was a political conversation, like everyone would retreat into their corners, and there would never be someone backing down. And there they did, and that's great.
Good. I want to remind everyone who is watching live that we are taking live questions. We got a bunch. Go ahead, Kim.
Yeah, Randy in the chat room is asking about your coaching. He says, can beginners get a coach, or should one be further along to get the benefits of being coached?
We accept all levels, all people. Our only requirement is you have to be cool. We create run, walk.
Yeah, thanks, babe. Appreciate it. Sorry.
We create run walk protocols. We do all hiking training, and then we do anything up from there to training athletes for elite marathoners. So we welcome people of all. Just be cool.
But I think that question gets back to coaching in general and the whole theory about coaching. My big thing with it is that a coach isn't necessarily like, I don't think it should be a teacher-student relationship or like an authority figure down to a subordinate. It should be a peer-to-peer friendship-based relationship, trust, a relationship built on just mutual trust. And where coaching really comes in, not just us. I think any coach is especially valuable when you're starting out and you're facing this like these mountains of uncertainty, both about like what you're capable of, what path you should take in training, and also just how running fits into your life. Every single coach that I know has so many data points where they get to live dozens, if not hundreds of lives over time. And you build up this wisdom related to running as a part of someone's identity right alongside the other things that matter to them, whether that's, the things that really matter, like being a parent or teacher, or things that matter a lot less, like loving pizza, though that might need to be up at the top for me at least. And so a coach can really make a difference in that. And that's one reason why, we're not the coaches for everyone. We really take a touchy-feely approach to this. And we do have methodology behind it, but, a coach can work for anyone. And I think the coolest stories in SWAP are the people that come in, have no idea what they're capable of, and we kind of help show them the way a little bit, and then maybe get invited to their wedding later, though no obligation for that.
I think the helpful thing too is we have daily communication with all our athletes, and I think that's actually really useful when you're first starting out, just because sometimes it can be a little bit more frustrating when you're first starting out, or things might have to be changed more. And so I think we've had actually a lot of success with kind of helping people get going just from that daily communication.
I'm also really curious, just kind of in the specifics of coaching as a whole. I've worked with coaches in the past who deal a lot with numbers and percentages and working on certain thresholds and heart rates and that sort of thing. Is that the path that you guys take, or is it more organic with your athlete, or is there another methodology that you're using that engages your athletes at a different level?
So yeah, it varies a lot. We try to really tailor towards individual people. I think the starting point is that running training as like a general, like the paradigm of running training is mostly well understood. We have very specific very specific methodological approach where we focus almost purely on running economy and then build from there, which is just the amount of energy it takes to go a given pace. But when it comes to like quantification, we try to limit the amount of opportunities there are for the athletes to judge themselves. So while we enjoy data on our end, on the back end, we don't assign paces. We don't, do a lot of the more. We don't want people to think of themselves as a number. We want each day to not be judged based on, we don't like success of the run not to be judged based on whether they achieved some workout standard, but whether they were able to enjoy the experience or make some memories or not get injured or, be there for their child and still get a run in. So while, if you look at our list of athletes, like there's accolades there. So, we're coming at it from a very scientific end on our end. We try to like have it be a little bit behind the curtain. So we'll talk to athletes about it, but then limit opportunities to hate yourself about your running performance, which I think we all deal with, like no matter where you are in running, whether you're running your first marathon, like Ryan, who's sponsoring the show, or if you're a professional athlete getting paid.
Brian with a B.
I was going to say for my athletes, it's pretty much all on an individual basis, thinking about data and analyzing it. So I have some athletes who in their log give me pictures of kids and pizza and fun things like that. And then other athletes who track sleep and stress levels and heart rate and mileage. And so it's just really, for me, it's what the athlete wants and what they enjoy tracking and how they, how I can analyze that for them.
Excellent. We have lots of live questions that are coming in. I want to make sure that we don't skip out on some of those.
Yeah, you talked about taking all levels and all abilities. Charville in the chat room asks, what's the difference between coaching elites and average Joes, if at all? Who is harder to coach?
I would say there's no difference, and I think actually they're both equally fun as long as you send me cool pictures. Cool pictures of dogs or kids.
So I would say that one of the founding principles of SWAP is that everyone is elite. And something that we try to tell everyone is that we don't differentiate whatsoever in terms of approach. I mean, when you think about what makes someone elite, there's a few things involved, but like the two big ones are, one, like who's their genetics, who their parents are, and two, their life circumstances. Like if someone's working 70 hours a week and has 3 kids, like they're in a different boat. And so we're not in the position to say that anything is a more valuable choice than others. I mean, we love the people that are dirtbagging it as professional runners, just like we love the people that are, CEOs or teachers or, whatever. Like any goal matters. But when it comes to like elite versus, more like, let's say middle of the pack runners, though I don't love that term, it's, the training is basically the same, like planning it and dealing in, forming that friendship is basically the same. I would say the only difference is that when livelihood is on the line, you have a little bit more you get a little bit more nervous, I would say. A good example being our athlete, Kat Bradley, who, she was on, and she, so when she was running for the win at Western States, like knowing that her life would never be the same if she won. She didn't have a professional contract at that point. She had just gotten laid off at her teacher's job, just as because she's so young. So for last one in, first one out type policy. And so knowing oh my God, if she does this, she's a runner. She can do whatever, this is going to change her life forever. So that's the only little difference. But I would say that on weekends when our athletes are racing, we're tied to our phones waiting for every text, no matter who it's from. And some of the best ones have been people running their first half marathon or something.
First 5K,
yeah. It's just such a big life achievement.
I definitely want to start talking about that before we, because we're getting a little bit close to the end, and I don't want that to happen because I feel like we are just getting into it.
Yeah.
But of course, we will have our post show with both David and Megan tonight. A question that I'm curious to ask you guys before we start getting into the tips for various distances and runners and stuff like that who might be watching the show. Social media now is allowing people to compare themselves to one another, whether accidentally or purposefully. And I know that you guys touched a little bit on it earlier in the show. And this is something that I've been struggling with myself, is the inevitable comparison between yourself and a fellow athlete. Because you're not only going to compare the abilities, but you're also going to compare the numbers, the miles. You look at people's Stravas and go, wow, I didn't realize that I was slacking last week. I put in a 60-mile week and 20,000 feet of gain, and that's half of what X did. Is there some substance to the social media side of things, or is it something that we should definitely take a step back from and focus entirely on our own individual progress and journey?
Yeah, I mean, social media and being connected like this is a double-edged sword with running. I think the benefits greatly outweigh the negatives. So the benefits being this team community aspect that I was mentioning. I mean, the coolest thing for us is we have a SWAT group where a good example is, I don't know if people were following the Tromso Sky Race, but tragedy struck. Hillary Allen fell, one of our top international athletes, fell 35 meters during the race, survived miraculously. One of our athletes was doing the race, happens to live in Tromso, and spent a few days with her at the hospital. They had never met before. And, it just shows like the benefits of this interconnectedness is that they're a team, not just in SWAT, but like the trail running community, because I'm sure, Liza Ershova, who was helping Hillary, would have done that for someone else too. So that's the great part. And with running, you can feel like you're alone. And it's the hardest part about running. It's a lonely sport. And if you feel like you're a part of that team, which social media allows, it makes running so much more beautiful. And like, what I love, and Ginger and Arrive is a great example of that. A lot of the people that interact on this show, some of them might not even be running right now, or they might be running 10 miles a week. And they're like on some people in the chat room that are probably doing like Jim Walmsley numbers, 110 or 120. And no one is inherently more valuable because of that. The downside.
I was gonna say, we're gonna do the positivity sandwich. You're gonna give the good stuff, I'll give the bad stuff, and then we'll end on good stuff. I think it can be dangerous, actually. I think people, you can pick whatever picture you want and put it up on the internet, and it may not be a representation of even what you're doing in that day. For example, I've seen Instagram accounts where people are injured, but they're posting these really beautiful pictures of themselves running every day as if it's in the present. And it's interesting because I feel like sometimes you feel like you have to keep up with that. If you see that all these other runners are doing that, but it might not be, what they're actually doing in that day. And that can be dangerous just in terms of like overtraining and judging and comparing yourself to others.
Yeah, and so the final positivity sandwich flip side of that is that, because the lives you see aren't necessarily the lives that are led. And that's one thing coaching, like everyone has their demons and everyone's going through their own struggles, to lift each other up. And when it comes to viewing yourself, so externally first and then internally. Externally, like our goal is to be unconditionally supportive of others in the community. I mean, obviously of our athletes, but then of like every other person that we can. And I mean, hopefully that comes across in our social medias and interacting with us in person too. Which one, I mean, it just brings more positivity onto you, but two, it just helps everyone else. But then internally, to really step back and try to understand why you're doing this. Like, ego is not a healthy reason to try to be a runner long-term, and to really understand what's motivating you from an ego perspective and what's motivating you from a more pure place. And over time, practice mindfulness, push some of the self-judgment away as much as you can, and understand that you are not your race results, you are not your workout times. That has nothing to do with like your self-worth. And that's a really hard thing to come to. It takes practice, just like anything else in life, just like training. But over time, it's definitely possible. I mean, there will always be someone better than you in anything you do. So if you're trying to strive towards some impossible to reach endpoint, you're not going to be happy. So what we try to focus on and what we try to help others with is the process, and just like smiling through the bad stuff that you might face, but then also, loving the good stuff and not just looking through the next thing.
Real quick, I'm just gonna make this like a double cheeseburger sandwich. Really quick, there's a great book on this. Actually, it tells the story of Madison Halloran. It's written by Kate Fagan. It just came out, but it's about the tragic story of a young girl who kind of got caught up in the social media comparison and was a runner. So if anyone's interested, it's a great book and something I think a lot of women should read.
I think this is a fantastic reminder. And one thing that I really love, I'm going to kind of tout our own jazz. Not real
Tap
words.
our own shoes.
Tap our own shoes, dance in our own heels. We're going to come up with more actual allegories than what we're
really
talking
good
about.
at this.
The community here, Ginger Runner Live, and I'm talking to those who are watching live or maybe watching the archive version. Just the live chat room already, even just talking about this, everyone is so incredibly supportive of one another and their own goals and stuff like that. It's fantastic, and that's one thing that I really love about the social media side of things is that. Yes, there are avenues where we can compare and self-doubt and fill your lives with a little bit more negativity and dread. But there's awesome opportunities like this where the community far outweighs the negative side of things. So I commend those who are watching and who have been a part of the Ginger Runner Live community now for a number of years. And it's pretty awesome. It's awesome to see just how supportive everyone is.
Jumping in right there, when I was on in February, I was so blown away by the kindness of the Ginger Runner Live community. I got so many amazing emails, not about coaching, just about life and things. From that, it was like eye-opening to me. I think in some ways this community might be a little bit distinct from some of the others in some way. I don't know how, like where the overlap is. Like it might be a weird Venn diagram that someone needs to do at some point. But yeah, I was just blown away with like the kindness that I got after that.
You know, since we started it, 2011, late 2011, there's been the occasional, troll that will come in and hate what I'm doing because I'm not fast. I'm not a runner because I'm not running sub 5s or whatever. So how can I call myself the Ginger Runner? But then there's this far outweighing side of just amazing people, amazing stories, and that's what surprised me. And I'm sure you get this a lot too. When you get these emails, it's just like how do these people have these such incredible stories, and they inspire me, and I'm sure they inspire you. And I know Kim and I will read emails that we get, and it's just like tears and incredible stories. And so that the community that we've managed to create here is incredibly unique, and I don't know how it's just managed to stay so incredible as we've continued to grow. You often worry like, oh, as you grow, you're going to lose touch or it's going to warp into something else. But man, we've been super fortunate that the Ginger Runner community has only gotten better and stronger and more caring, which I don't know, in today's days, I think is a really great thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And I can imagine that the swap is very similar in that just the fact that it's some work and all play, it just keeps it has so much positive energy behind it. I think that's amazing. We got to move on because we got tons of questions, and I have tons of questions. Let's get to some of the live questions, and I'll dovetail into some of mine. There's already a dovetail drinking game, by the way. I use that word a lot on the show, dovetail, because it's
we gotta.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep.
Join in.
Mm-hmm.
Cheers.
Mm-hmm.
Cheers. I've been using the word a lot as kind of a transitional word over the years, and people have caught on to my usage of it. So now it's a drinking game. So drink. But go ahead, Kim. Sorry.
Yeah, a question from Amber in the chat room. A question for the both of you. What has been your favorite and least favorite race? And what, if anything, did you learn from them?
That's a good question. I think my favorite race actually is the Way Too Cool 50K in Auburn, California. Just because it gets back to community. The Bay Area community is a fantastic trail running community. And from my understanding, I think it's actually one of the biggest trail races in the US. And it's just got such a great camaraderie. And they have these frog cupcakes at the end that are delicious. Plus,
you didn't get to run this year, though, right? Because you were saving the dog. Oh, no, David, who was saving the dog this year?
That was at the US 50K champs.
Oh, same trails, though, right?
Yeah, Addie.
That's what I'm thinking of.
So she had a little trip to the vet.
Got it.
But yeah, that's my favorite. That's my favorite tour race. I don't know, David.
I guess I'll jump in on least favorite. Well, so I'm gonna be like totally spin that. I'm gonna break the rules and like say something a race that didn't go well. But so we were on the U.S. World Trail Championship team in June of this year, and we both had like objectively one of the worst performances of our lives, which is a little tough when we don't care so much about our own performance, but when you're wearing red, white, and blue, it's a little bit more of like, oh man, am I letting someone down? So I guess it was mile 23 of a 50K. I was just broken down at the aid station. Like it was a crazy European course. I wasn't ready. And so I'm just like debating what I'm going to do. And then Megan comes through having one of her worst races ever. And we ended up jogging it in together. And, finishing in like what was probably the most difficult experience, but ended up being the most memorable. So, I think you can always find really amazing moments in even the worst race experiences. Like what I always like to say to athletes is that races are like life into a bite-sized morsel that you can just chew without having anything to worry about. Like there's no consequence at the end, good or bad. It just is. So yeah, that was tasty. It was kind of like the frog cupcakes.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Awesome. I definitely want to start getting into the conversations regarding questions and tips, because we do have two coaches on tonight. And I want to remind everyone watching live that we've had coaches on before. And David and Megan obviously have I'm assuming you're accepting clients?
Yes.
Cool.
And there was a question earlier from Orlando. They were wondering, do you coach runners who aren't in your same geographical area?
We do. We have runners all over the world, actually, which is really fun because their Strava's update at like 2 a.m. our time. And it's fun to see. It's fun to see, the international races that everyone's doing.
Yeah, but if for any reason we weren't the exact right fit for someone, we would try to refer to another coach that would be. I mean, one of our goals that I always try to, I really want every coach that comes from a place of like helping people to be really to have the success that they dream of. And because I think the relationship can be so productive. So you can always contact us. And even if you don't think we're for you, we can try to help you out with that.
And I love that. I think it's great to be able to say something like that, knowing that this is also a business for you. But coaches are like shoes in the sense that you will find a pair, in this case, literally a pair, but you will find one that works for you and you'll be able to shop around and that sort of thing. But they are taking clients. So if some of the tips that we talk about here in the next couple of minutes intrigues you, don't hesitate to reach out or ask them questions of your own in case we don't get to your questions tonight, right now. So I want to pose some scenarios to you guys, David and Megan, regarding various distances in training, because we have viewers of the entire gamut that watch this show, whether it's live or even in the archive. Over the course of the duration of a podcast, we have all abilities. For someone who maybe is looking to increase from maybe 1 or 2 days of running a week, maybe they're only running a couple miles, maybe a mile, would you have any tips or advice for them on how to maybe up their game, or maybe they're looking to set a goal, just kind of that initiation into the running realm? Do you have any tips for someone in that stage?
Yeah, I think sometimes that when you think of getting out the door, you think you have to do this big run or has to be a set thing. But, even running 15 or 20 minutes a day, just building up that consistency is great. You don't have to go out and, nail intervals or do this or that. Just building up the consistency early on is key. And then you can build off of that, doing that 15 minutes a day and really, take that on and start mixing in strides and, even throwing in some long runs from there.
Yeah, so before you worry about workouts or anything complicated, before you even start reading a lot of the articles I write, focus first on just really learning what easy actually means to you and just dialing in really easy short runs, working up to 5 runs a week before you worry about epicness. Because I think people always assume that great athletes or people reaching their potential comes from doing epic training, and it doesn't. It comes from doing consistent training over time. So, workouts, don't worry about that. Worry about finding your easy pace, and then learn to run fast, over very short distances, things like, anywhere from 50 to 100 meter strides, or do them on an uphill, rather than going out and hammering mile repeats when you're doing, 10 miles a week, which really introduces injury risk, and it's super painful if you're not really experienced. And, the goal is to make this fun. So learn your easy, consistency, add some short strides, and then from there you can build. But really make sure that you dial in the building blocks first.
I get this email a lot. This is kind of one of the big questions that I get is I'm dealing with blank, whether it's PF, some sort of muscle pull, maybe it's a tight like niggle in their calf, some small issue, but I want to increase my mileage, or I want to train for this race, or I want to do X amount of distance. What should I do? In my case, I'm dealing still with a bit of an adductor issue that's been residual since February. It comes in and out. I'm able to do long distances like I did this weekend, but the pain is a little bit more severe afterwards. It's not getting worse, but I'm dealing with something. And so when I get these emails from people, I'm like, these are great questions for coaches. So would you have any advice for people who maybe are dealing with something at some period of their training process and looking to continue to race or to increase distances, that sort of thing?
I think I'm
Doctor.
almost not there yet.
Almost doctor.
I think the big thing is actually cross training is a big buzzword right now, but we are both big proponents of cross training, and we've actually developed both biking, ellipticaling, and stair mill plans to bring athletes back from injury. We've actually both done them ourselves, and they've worked really well. And so not being afraid, you don't need to run 6 or 7 or 5 to 7 days a week. You can throw in cross training and help yourself heal through that.
Yeah, and generally to like take the long-term perspective. So one of the other, I keep coming down to like foundational principles, but we like talk about these things. So I hate that it sounds business word buzz speak, but I promise we're doing it over beer and just like super chill. So one of the foundational principles is the 3-year plan. So every decision that you make about your running and swap, we try to ground in how will this make me the best, most fulfilled runner I can be in 3 years. So when it comes to injuries, like that sometimes makes it a little bit clearer. So if someone's dealing with some pain in their shin, and maybe 2 weeks off and get on the bike and do some cross training is the best 3-year policy, even if it might be overprotective and over-inclusive for this particular risk. And then the trick is you just keep pushing that 3-year time horizon back a little bit. Like it's always 3 years away, because then it allows you to think that long-term process, because no training cycle makes a runner. What makes a runner is all the work over all the years that you haven't seen. So yeah, 3-year process, which means for injuries, usually err on the side of caution. Like we'd rather someone like 2 days off, no big deal. 2 weeks off, not really a big thing. 2 months off kind of sucks. But like dealing with an injury for 2 years, which often happens if someone runs through like classic one is like hip pain or something like that could end up being a fractured femoral neck or something. So yeah, we're on the side of caution, and then don't hate on cross training. Like it can really do positive things, especially for trail runners, because trail running is like a dirty process in terms of you're on dirt, you're stepping over rocks, you're doing a lot of dynamic movements. So fitness matters, like as opposed to something like the track where you're just repeating the same motion over and over.
Love it. 2 more scenarios. We're going to talk a little bit about Brian, our Ginger Runner Live sponsor for the month through Patreon. Thank you, Brian. But Brian's training for his first marathon. I'd like to think of the marathon as kind of the gateway to ultras. 50Ks are also the gateway to ultras. If someone is training for their first marathon or 50K, what are some advice tips that you might have if the longest they've run previous race-wise is maybe a half marathon? Because that's usually what happens. Yeah. We have a lot of viewers that do a half marathon, they nail it, or a couple, and then they're looking, oh, I want to jump to the ultra or a marathon in this instance. Would you have advice for that jump in making sure that they toe the line healthy and get it done?
I think I have 2 pieces of advice that come to mind initially. One is nutrition, just making sure that in your long runs, you have a consistent nutrition plan that you're planning to follow on race day, whether that be liquid nutrition like Tim Tollefson or Magda. Both of those athletes do liquid nutrition, or gels, just getting a consistent plan that you're comfortable with and that you trust come race day. And then the other thing is don't judge. I think marathons are awesome because they hurt, but they hurt for everyone. And you're going to get to a spot during the race where you just have to embrace the suck. And that happens for everyone. And so just be ready for it. Practice that in training in the middle of a long run when it hurts. And you'll be ready for race day. And
then I totally agree with those 2. And then from a more like specifics of training methodology point of view, successful marathons don't come down to mile repeats or like more intense workouts, though those are essential building blocks. But what those do, those are training to train. What really counts are the long runs you do in the build-up that are more specific to your race. So if it's a trail marathon, like getting out there on the trails for 20 to 20, that many miles and experiencing what you're going to feel. And if it's a road marathon, really understanding what your marathon pace is and running it for, 13 to 16 miles at some point in the buildup, in addition to these long runs. But at the same time, emphasizing like consistency in general weekly, volume over going out and like thinking that you are track repeats. Like you don't, most people probably shouldn't be on the track unless you like get some perverse love from it. If you're training for something like a marathon or even like a shorter race, that you can focus a lot more on the things that are specific to your event and overall volume.
Perfect. That's great advice for Brian and for anyone who's looking to do that. And the last scenario, I'm going to let Kim set this one up.
You set it up.
You want me to set it up? Do you have questions for them?
Any last minute advice for somebody like perhaps myself? I'm going into my first 100-mile race in 2 weeks' time, Cascade Crest. Any last minute words of encouragement or advice for somebody going into a big race like that?
I think building off the advice I just gave to Brian about judging, I think knowing exactly why you're doing the race before you go into the race and having that in your mind so that when it gets tough at mile 80 or mile 60 or mile 20, that you know exactly why you're out there and just the commitment to finishing. I think those are two really important things going to 100.
Yeah, and so building off that, I'm going to give away like one of our secrets, which is, well, first, you're obviously very fit. Like we follow like you as much as we can in social media. So, you've done most of the training. You're ready from that point of view. Don't over taper, like keep running. There's no magic that happens in the last 2 weeks. Like you're not going to heal magically. But the secret is what Megan was saying, where we try to induce an existential crisis 7 to 10 days before their race, where I'll ask a question, something along the lines of, do you actually want to do this? Why are you doing this? And not be my usual, let's get this guys self. And often that will lead to a little bit of a mini crisis. But what comes out the end of that crisis is often the resolve that it takes for something like 100 miles, which, at mile 70 is in your head. So a good example is we did this with Kat, we did this with Claire, but who might be more identifiable for the people watching. Well, we turned very dark here. Sorry about that.
It's like it's gradually getting darker and darker there. And you guys okay?
We're actually auditioning for the next Ring. Everyone, 7 days after you watch this, I'm sorry. So one that might be relevant to people watching this is Anna Olson, who is a resident at Stanford, crazy busy life, doing her first 100K. And I asked her this. And she came back and was like, whoa, why are you saying this? The typical things that you might expect with someone that, hasn't had me present this before. But then a day later, after we went back and forth, sorry, I'm adjusting this. She just said, I'm in it. I'm going to finish this no matter what. I'm ready. And she knew why she was doing it. And then she finished her first 100K at Canyon's 100K, which is a really tough one. While working whatever.
She worked 80 hours a week before doing that.
So I would say that the why is what to drill down in the last 2 weeks, and also to eat lots, especially the squishier the better on the 100 start line.
That's actually not the first time that you've heard that in the last couple weeks. The squishier the better.
One of my pacers, Linda, she just sent me an email, I think yesterday, saying eat lots and get a little squishy.
Get squishy.
Squishy time.
Yeah. Great tips, great advice. I think we'll get to more of that in the post show with both David and Megan, because there's still lots of questions that are unanswered here from the live chat room. So I want to remind everyone, if you would like to join us for the post show, it's very easy. You don't have to, but if you'd like to support the channel and support the content that we're creating, it's very easy. Just go to go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner, and for as little as $1 a month, you get all of the post shows with our guests for Ginger Runner Live, and each level has different tiers and different perks and stuff like that. So tonight we get both David and Megan for the post show. So Patreon people will see you here in just a couple of seconds. Go ahead.
I just want to remind you.
Yes.
I don't want you to forget.
Oh no.
we do need to do the quickie question quiz.
Oh, I have it pulled up.
Excellent.
Yeah, and there's no way I'm forgetting because we got an email last week from a very disgruntled viewer,
Some
a
hate
regular
mail
viewer, a
last
regular
week.
viewer. Like I said, occasionally we get some mail where you're like, really? But last week, someone was very disappointed in us not asking the quickie question quiz questions during the main show. We did ask them in the post show,
We did.
but that was because we had a very limited time with our guest last week. Okay, so here's how this works. David, I think you did the quickie question quiz. Am I correct?
Yes, I just want to hear Megan's answers. So.
Oh, Lord.
Perfect. So what we'll do is we'll do our regular quickie question quiz, but I think I'm going to have David answer first for Megan,
Oh,
and then
God.
find Megan's answer. This is because you're married and because
like some sort
you're
of like newlyweds.
it's a newlyweds game. All the old game shows are hot again. So basically, Megan, for you, it's very, very easy. It's a very simple list of questions. Just answer the first thing that comes to mind. Don't think about it too hard. But David, we're gonna go to your answers first. You're gonna answer for Megan, and then Megan will hear the truth from you.
I feel like this is somehow breaking the guy code, but going to my former lawyer background, I'll have to look up the code, but let's do it.
I will just make sure you get 100%. How's that sound? Okay.
It's pass-fail, actually. It's med school.
Yeah, that's pass-fail. And I like the backlighting. Nice backlighting.
Yeah, it's mood for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And also, before we go out of the live show, I want to make sure, I should have said this at the top of the show, but we got to meet the dog Addie. People were asking about
People are asking about Addie.
if Addie has a dragon costume.
People are
and
also asking if Addie and Gus have met.
She'll come
They
for
haven't.
she'll come for the quiz.
oh my goodness.
Oh, hi.
We are big
She
fans
actually-
of dogs on the show.
I spilled some beer during the show and she was drinking it.
Look at those big paws. We love dogs on the show,
Yeah,
so
we
of
do.
course we have to show them off.
We do.
Okay, cool. So Megan, whenever you're ready, just give me the thumbs up, and then of course we'll go to David, then Megan for each question. All right. What was Megan's first race?
When she was 11, she raced on the Jersey Shore and won $300, but she couldn't accept it because of amateur rules.
That is true. I also want a giant beer mug, but my parents wouldn't let me have any beer either.
So far, we're batting 100. That's great.
Yeah.
Favorite running movie?
The Kevin Costner one about mentoring the team. Oh, what was
McFarland?
that? Yeah, McFarland, USA.
That counts because I think that's the only running movie I've seen. In all honesty.
Okay. Trails or road?
Oh, yeah, trails.
Yeah.
Wow, 100% so far. Hooking David up here. Favorite place to run?
I'm gonna say it's not at the 3 a.m. field that she ran around like 65 times on a 12-mile run, because it was the one place where Addie and I could fetch before, to keep her safe. That was just killing time though. I'm actually gonna say Aspen, the trails outside of Aspen.
He's correct. The Sunnyside Trail. Actually, we just raced it in the marathon, which is the big reason why we did the marathon. You never see anyone out there. There's all these aspen groves.
So when it comes to running, she has the memory of a fruit fly. It's just like the last trail she did. I'm just gonna go with that one.
That's
Bucket list race?
Oh, I'll say Lake Sonoma 50 mile.
That's close. I'm actually going to go with North Base 50 mile because I'm considering entering it this year. So trying out the 50 mile distance.
We'll give it a pass because those are very close and they're both
Yes.
very good 50 milers.
Yeah.
This should be a fun one. Guilty pleasure TV show?
It's not Game of Thrones, I've learned,
No.
because I watched Game of Thrones while she was on surgery rotation, and we've started the new season, and I've tried to catch her up while we're watching.
It's impossible.
And what we've learned is I have to give her an hour-long leg massage to keep it
Reconciliation for
happening.
watching Game of Thrones.
I'll say Broad City on Comedy Central.
I'd say that's probably it. But I would think probably more Stephen Colbert just because I like watching it every day. But I wouldn't say that's really like.
Guilty?
That's not
I would say
guilty.
she doesn't pass this question.
Yeah.
What is David's guilty pleasure TV show?
Probably Game of Thrones because he's watching like nude people while I'm at work.
Is that accurate?
I try to explain to her that it all comes from a place of exposition, and it matters to the
Well, I
story.
get home at 9 o'clock from work, and he's watching Game of Thrones.
All she sees is boobs and dragons. I see the greater societal meaning here of boobs and dragons.
Now you know why Kim and I both watch Game of Thrones. Boobs and dragons. Yeah.
Right.
Favorite pre-race meal?
Oh, she's like pretty consistent with like a Cliff Z bar, the children's bars, the little organic bars. Plus,
Those
it's a lot
are
of fun.
good. I really like the brownie ones.
So if the race starts before 7 a.m., I do the Cliff Z bars, and then if it starts after 7 a.m., I do the Cliff, just the regular chocolate chip bars.
Those Z bars, the chocolate ones taste like just brownies. I really like them.
I think we were the first Cliff athletes to order like 10 boxes of those. They're like, you can't even do that.
You're like, I don't care. I want it.
Yeah, we want this.
This will be a fun one. Favorite post-race indulgence? What's the first thing she goes to at the end of a race?
Oh man. Well, I would say our go-to recently has been like double cheeseburgers. Though that's pre-race too. So I'm going to say double cheeseburgers.
You're close. See, I do have the memory of a fruit fly, and we had hot dogs after a race we did 2 weeks ago, and it was really good.
Nice. And for both of you, what are your current running kicks? This one just for both of you.
The Hoka Speed Goat 2. They're fantastic shoes.
And for me, it's the Challenger ATR 3, which like I actually try not. I mean, when I'm coming from a coaching perspective, like all of that is off the table. I don't care about necessarily. Like I'm not trying to just sell shoes at that point. But the Challengers are great for roads, great for trails. Jim Walmsley wears them, and if they're good enough for Jim, they're good enough for me.
True. Both reviews of both of those shoes are actually available on the Ginger Runner channel right now. A little self plug, but David gets, I would say 90%. That's a pass grade.
That was really good.
And I think he did.
I think you got high on
better
it
than what you would do. And there's also like the chat room's extremely impressed.
They're very impressed, David. Most of the husbands or significant others in the chat room are like, that is way better than I would have done with
to
my
be fair,
significant
we
other.
spend literally every minute of almost every day together now that she's like, even when like every weekend too. So it's a little bit of an unfair advantage because like, I don't know.
Well, this gets back to the balance question. I just hang out with David as like the 3 things I do. So he better get all those right.
That's a very valid point.
Yeah.
I want to thank our guests tonight, David and Megan Roche, for joining us, for talking to us for a long time and telling us some of the secrets behind what they do, some of their coaching styles, all about some of their athletes. I wish we had touched more on some of their athletes' accomplishments, because I feel like lately they've been on this incredible streak of just huge victory. Some are of success.
Talk about that in the post
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that in the post show. So I want to remind everyone who is watching live, or even if you're watching an archive version, don't hesitate to do this. But go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner. For as little as $1 a month, you basically support the channel, support what we're doing here, and you also get to enjoy the post shows that we do with all of our guests as well, and interact with them more on a one-on-one basis. We get to get through all of the questions that we did in the main show, plus additional questions, rapid fire, to our guests. It's a lot of fun. And a big shout out to Brian Sands once again for helping Ginger Runner Live happen at the top tier Patreon support for both July and now August. So it's pretty awesome. And he's in the chat room. He's in the chat room every week. It's really great to see him there and follow his journey to his first marathon.
Yeah.
So we'll keep you guys posted on that journey each week. So that's it for tonight's show. David and Megan, where can people find you on social media? There will be residual questions that don't get asked tonight. Where can they reach out to you and find you, and websites, Twitters, all that?
We're everywhere. So Facebook, Strava, Instagram, Twitter.
Google, outside your window. Our email is online at our coaching website, someworkallplay.blogspot.com. We haven't invested in web development because we haven't needed to. And you can email anytime about anything, even like honestly.
Even trolls, we take you too.
Yeah. Well, the flip side of thinking everything's a team is that even if you don't want coaching, even if you just have questions, we'll answer those without like no things asked. Or you just want to spam our email accounts. Puppy pictures, we like those.
Awesome.
I'm just gonna send them 100 pictures of Gus
Just
tonight.
all the pictures of Gus.
Yeah, oh my
love
God.
that.
You have no idea. That would make our lives.
We'll picture swap. We'll dog swap.
Yeah.
Great. I'm glad that we discussed that during the main show. This is the stuff we talk about in the post show. Can't wait for that. You guys, thank you so much for being on tonight's show. Really, really appreciate it. It's awesome, and the energy is fantastic, of course, and real fun night tonight. Thank you for watching live, if you are watching live, or if you're listening in the podcast or the archive version, thank you as well. We'll see you guys next week for another Ginger Runner Live, and we've got some big races happening in the coming weeks. Not only is Kim running Cascade Crest, but we've got Squamish. All the Squamish races are coming up this weekend, which are obvious favorites of ours. Have a lot of history at those events, and some viewers who are in the chat room currently are going to be partaking in various distances there, 50K, 50 mile, or even the 50-50. So it's going to be really exciting to kind of catch up with people next week. UTMB is coming up. This is like the next 3 or 4 weeks are the big weeks in ultra running.
Yeah.
And then we take a hiatus for a couple months, and it's right back to it in November, December as we kind of wrap up the year. Regardless, it's awesome to have our guests on tonight, and we'll see them in the post show, but we'll also see you guys, the live viewers, next week. Get out there, train hard, race harder, and part of the hardest. I know I am. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Ginger Runner.